Hello, my name is Father Matthew Roche-Saunders. I'm here in Aberystwyth in mid-Wales. It's really lovely to be with you as we prepare for Christmas, the coming of the King. And so today I'd like to talk about smallness, things that are small, and why God chose to come as a baby. He chose to come to us small. There's something very fragile in small things. There's also something so beautiful in them. The ring that a married couple share with each other on the day of their wedding, it's the smallest part of the day, and yet in some senses the most meaningful for what it shows, for what they've committed to each other. Small things are very precious. If you've had children or a little brother or sister or little cousin, we remember the day that they're born or the first day we see them as babies. We think, wow, this life is so precious. These limbs are so small. Everything's just so beautifully crafted. For that reason, there's also something we need to care for that because it's fragile. We need to be careful not to lose something small, lose a ring or lose a little item that's important to us. I remember when I was in primary school, the teacher told us about a story where she'd lost her wedding ring in the rubbish bin. She didn't realize it was in the rubbish bin, she just lost it. She lost her wedding ring. And she was devastated. And she prayed to the Sacred Heart of Jesus. Sacred Heart of Jesus, I place all my trust in thee. She said it was her favorite prayer. And the reason it was her favorite, because she prayed it on this occasion and they found it out of the blue. They found this ring, this very, very small ring in the rubbish bin. How it got there, she doesn't know. But how happy they were when they found this small treasure. Small is really beautiful. And this is what God invites us to trust when He comes as a small child. That God doesn't come great and powerful and mighty. He comes small. He comes to us weak. He comes to us asking us to care for Him. This leads us into a trust of Jesus, that if He were great and mighty, maybe we'd be scared. Maybe that would be our first reaction. But because God comes to us small, we're drawn towards Him. We're drawn towards that child born in Bethlehem. We're drawn towards God, who is so mighty and makes Himself so small. And there are places in our life maybe where we can experience smallness and it's challenging to us. It feels like a negative thing. I'd like to talk about 3 of those places where perhaps we think of smallness as bad. And maybe the Lord is inviting us into trusting Him in those places. So the first place sometimes we see smallness is in the church, is in our faith. A lot of people these days, especially here in the UK, they talk about how mass attendance is going down, how the numbers of priests are going down, how the numbers of religious are going down, how everything seems to be getting smaller. And it's often, if not always, put in language that sounds like that's a bad thing. Sure, we'd love the church to be everyone in the world. We'd love everyone in the world to come to know Jesus Christ. That's our longing. That's also our call, is that we have a calling to go out, to share good news with our friends, to love those around us, to serve them in mercy. It's true. We long for every soul to know Jesus. But we are not asked in this life to be successful. We're asked to be faithful. Mother Teresa said this very well. She said, don't worry about being successful, be faithful. Be faithful. And so we see things getting smaller around us. We haven't got many friends who go to church. Maybe we're the only one of our friendship group who know anything about Jesus. And that kind of feels like a sad thing. So there's an element about that that's sad. There's an element about that that's good. Because Pope Benedict said to us, when the church grows smaller, the church becomes more purified. At the moment, here in this parish, next door to our church, there's been a building project going on to build 14 new houses, and it took a long time to put these houses up. And I thought, how many hours go into a project like this? I was really struck by the number of people involved and the different elements of the project where different skills were needed. But then came the day when they took the scaffolding off the houses, and the houses looked so small all of a sudden. Everything on that site looked so small. It had looked like a huge building site, but most of it was scaffolding. They took the scaffolding poles off, and all of a sudden it was like there was nothing there, just these houses. The project looked small. Pope Benedict XVI used the same image to talk about the church becoming smaller. He said sometimes it's the scaffolding that we need to take off. We need to take off those things that aren't actually the house. They aren't actually faith in Jesus Christ. They aren't actually the center. There's something that's distracted us a little bit. Pope Benedict said in this time that we're in right now, it's a time for removing the scaffolding, for purifying our faith in Jesus Christ, of becoming small. Pope Benedict said, for the church to become small is nothing to be frightened about, because now we can focus on the essentials. We can focus on Jesus Christ himself and what he came to show us, what he came to do for us, which was to die for us and to raise us to new life in his resurrection. We call this the Carigma of our faith. The word Carigma is a Greek word that we have a similar word in English, which is the word kernel. The kernel of, for example, an ear of corn. We take away the leaves, and inside is a tiny, tiny kernel of corn. That's what we use to make popcorn or corn on the cob. These little kernels of corn. That's this. We could say the fruit. The fruit of that corn is the kernel, the very, very center. In our faith, we say that the kernel, the Carigma, is that Jesus Christ, who is God himself, was born to the Virgin Mary, lived 33 years on this world, and died for us, rose from the dead for us, and sent the Holy Spirit upon us. This is the center, the Carigma of our faith. That must always be protected in our lives, in our faith, in our prayer, in our missionary activity, in our service of each other. Why? Because Jesus has set me free by dying on the cross, by rising from the dead. It's okay if things become small around me. Why? Because it's the Lord himself who's allowing that to happen. So our job isn't to be very, very successful in worldly terms. Our job is to be faithful to that small kernel, to the small child who's born to us in Bethlehem. And if things become smaller, we say, Lord, I trust in you. I trust that you're still leading us. So in the church, we don't have to be afraid of smallness. Maybe the second place we're naturally afraid of being small is how we need to trust God as his children. You know, in the Our Father in the Mass, the priest says, at the Saviour's command and formed by divine teaching, we dare to say, Our Father. There's a reason he says we dare to say, because that doesn't come naturally to us. It doesn't come naturally to be children of God who trust God for everything, to be small in his hands. Sometimes it comes more naturally to say, actually, God, I've got this sorted. Actually, I want to be a grown-up, and I don't need to call on you so often. Actually, I don't need to come back to you for your mercy. I don't need to come back to you for the things of life, my daily needs. And the Father's saying to us, just ask. Jesus says that, doesn't he? Ask, and it will be given to you. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and the door will be open to you. What do those three words have in common? Ask, seek, knock. That I need to be the one who's asking. I need to be the one who's seeking. I need to be the one who's knocking. I need to be a child. I need to be someone in need. I need to be small. I need to not have it all sussed myself. I need to allow the Lord to say, let me be your Father. Let me provide for you. So in our trusting relationship with God as his children, it can be a fearful place to be needy all the time. Saint Therese of Lisieux was a wonderful saint to emphasize spiritual childhood. Jesus says to us in the gospel, it's the children who enter the kingdom of heaven. He doesn't just mean those who are physically children, but those who live as spiritual children of the Father. Those who understand their relationship with the Father as sons and daughters, totally loved, totally cared for. And Saint Therese understood this. There was a time in her life, she was 2 years old, she said. As she wrote in her diary later, she was 2 years old, and her sister, older sister, came to Therese and Therese's other sister with a basket of dolls' toys and things to make dolls' toys. And she went to the older sister first. She said, what would you like? And the sister took a ball of wool that was in the basket and said, I would like this ball of wool to make some dolls. So the oldest sister turned to Therese and said, what would you like? And Therese said, I choose all, and went away with the whole basket. Went away to her room and had everything. And Therese wrote about this in her autobiography years later. She said, that instinct in me that was to choose whatever the Father wants to give me, to say I choose all, came alive, she said, in my spiritual life later on, where I was able to say, I choose all, not just the good things, also the sufferings. I choose it because the Father has asked me to choose it. The Father has offered it to me. This is the Father's will for me. Therese was totally dependent on her Father's will. And where did Therese learn that? From Jesus himself. Jesus is the one in the gospel who shows us a total dependence on his Father's will. In the Garden of Gethsemane, we hear Jesus say, Father, take this cup away from me. Left to me, this isn't what I would have chosen. Take this cup away from me. Yet, not what I will, but what you will, Father. Jesus teaches us, even in the painful experiences of life, where maybe we think, how could the Father be asking me to do this? Jesus shows us, even in those places, when we trust the Father as his sons and daughters, it always leads to the resurrection. Always. That's the journey. The journey of trusting the Father's will always leads to the resurrection. So in our need to trust God as his sons and daughters, there's no need to fear our smallness. Maybe just the third thing to finish. The third place maybe we can be afraid of our smallness is in our prayer. If you're anything like me, that's how I feel sometimes. Sometimes I go to my prayer and I think it's like I've never prayed before. It's like I've completely forgotten how to pray. And maybe it was just the day before I had a time of prayer that was really beautiful. The next day I think, wow, it's like I don't even know what to say to the Father. I don't even know how to be. My prayer can feel very small, as though I've made no progress in a worldly sense. I can't see the milestones. And then the day comes and I think, I don't know what I'm saying. I don't know how to pray. One of my favorite saints, whose name is Saint Josemaria Escriva, he said, sometimes the best thing to do is to go to your prayer and say, Lord, I don't know how to pray. And Saint Josemaria says, you can be sure that in saying that, you've already started praying. Lord, I don't know how to pray. Why? Because it's conversation between my heart and the Father's heart. That is what prayer is. So if my prayer feels so small in comparison, and I say that on purpose with speech marks over it, in comparison to somebody else's, I don't need to worry about that. Because comparison is never of the Lord. Comparison is never of the Lord, and would make me feel that my smallness is something wrong. No, God shows us in coming as a child at Christmas, smallness is beautiful. Smallness is where he calls us. Being small allows the Father to work his grace within us. So the life of prayer, which is really important that you and I persevere in it, that in some way every day we're making personal contact with our Father. In that place, we don't need to be able to say, wow, I'm getting older. I'm growing up as a prayer. I can see how mature I am as a prayer. No, that's not what prayer is about. prayer in many ways is to become even smaller, to become even younger, to know myself to be a son of God. Again, St. Josemaria Escriva, he said, it's true that we're children of God, we're sons and daughters of God. He said, but it's not enough for that just to be true. I have to sense it, he says. I have to sense that God is my Father who loves me. God is the one who holds me. And who do we hold in our hands? We hold small children. It's small children that we hold and care for. And that's what the Father does to us. He says, I made you small, and I love you small, and I came to join you as small. Because what is small, what is humble, what is trusting of the Father, this is what receives the kingdom of heaven. This is what's capable of receiving the kingdom of heaven. So may we this Christmas love those places of our smallness that maybe we thought of as places of weakness. May we love those places just as we love the small baby Jesus in the crib. May we visit him with love, and may we allow his smallness to give us new life. Good to be with you, and I wish you a really happy Christmas. God bless you.